listen to those cheers. Yes, here is the motorcade, and there's the President's car. We can tell because you can see Mrs. Kennedy's pink dress. They've left the bottom top off the limousine in spite of the rain, so they can see the people, and the people can see them, and they love them.
For me, it was the most important day of my life. I measure everything that's happening before it, or after it. I remember every detail, every instant, every little bit of information as it came in. I was at my desk. It was lunchtime. The executives had all gone out. I was in a hurry to finish page 44 of the May-June issue of Salon Hairstyles. Oh, not that I wrote it, or edited it, or anything. I just cut and pasted the pictures. It was an exacting job, though. You had to be very neat. I remember one time, I smeared some glue, and when we got the cover back, the model looked like she had a runny nose. Anyway, I was cutting and pasting the photos, and the fashion editor kept interrupting me to show me her real Chanel suit from Paris. And I had to pretend to be interested because she drank something awful in those days, and I didn't drink at all. And she kept lifting up her skirt to show me how the hemline was kept in place with lots of little chains sewn into the hem. And I was really thinking about my raspberry yogurt in the cooler section of the water fountain. Oh, I just had this horrible affair with this fella in the stockroom, and he hadn't shown up for 4 days. I was feeling really, really awful. It was a grey day here in New York, when all of a sudden, Mr. Kenedy, the advertising sales manager, burst in. He was a little cross-eyed and always looked a little crazy. He came bursting in, shouting, "Quick! Turn the radio on! The president's been shot in Dallas!"
I don't know why I come in here afternoons. All my underground theatrical friends coming in night. Alright, that's why I come in afternoons. I hate bars. I get sexy in bars. At least I think so. Alcohol is otherwise a down. Let's see. I could play a record, but after a while they all start to look alike. If I were bisexual, I could go out in the street and buy sex. But look, it's raining. I don't suppose since the creation of the world it's rained in this particular spot more than a couple of trillion times. And to think, I'm here to witness the trillionth and first. What, me? An award for being the 20th and first mortal to pass over the bridge from boredom to schizophrenia. Take those bars off the goddamn windows, you creeps. Otherwise we'll never lower any fresh victims in here.
Well, none of us could believe it. I mean, none of us could conceive it. We just sat there looking at him. I suppose we thought he was drunk or having palpitations. He was awful fat. But then he shouted, "Did you hear me? I said, turn the radio on!" And then Carrie, one of the managers, said, "Now cool it, Mr. Kenedy, and I'll turn the radio on." And he was getting a little frantic and said some terrible things to her, and then the fashion editor got involved and said some terrible things to him, and they were squabbling right over me, when all of a sudden, Carrie's radio started up, and the reporter said, "Now I want to get this just right." He said, "It was reported that 3 Negroes had been seen running from the overpass, and that 2 rifles had been confiscated from the scene. But it was going to be okay. They got the president straight to hospital." And then, all of a sudden, we couldn't hear anymore. Because it was like all the oil hogs in the city had started blowing all at once. And then there was a crash, like somebody had driven off the road and straight into the sidewalk. And then all the phones in the office started to ring, instantly, all at once.
I'm doing these things with Siamese dancing now over the Dada. You know the Dada is a certain well-known underground theatre. The most well-known, in fact. Of course, that doesn't make it 1/1,000,000th as famous as any chick with her tits and clits spread out in the centerfold of a fuck book. But in this teeny tiny, shriveling, shrinking, curdling clot of snot called theatre, El Dada is the most famous of the 412 underground theatres listed in Village Voice this week. Which means, if you're lucky enough to work there for a week, you might just pull out with a fast $5 and play it over house of 12. 12. That's the number of people, their average age, and the total of their IQs.
I hate this bar. I wish there was somewhere else to go. I come here day after day, and I sit here drinking, for Christ's sake. I don't know what else to do. I went 10 years without being in the bar. The whole 60s. I mean, I was active then. Now I really don't know what I'm doing. I have these terrible fights with my husband, Robbie, and I wind up here. We're both working when he isn't shooting up, and we're trying to save enough money to get a commune trip together. But people are so scared. He's scared. I come in here and I spend all our money, and I can't even seem to get drunk. I'm 29.
Dear Mom, believe it or not, I'm writing to you on pot, marijuana, what they call pot. Woo! I can't believe it. Everybody here smokes it. And the MPs even sent Gordon it. And my buddy Chick says he even goes into combat high. I don't see how they do it. I can hardly even write. But they do it. All the time. I keep falling down and they keep laughing at me. And I got very scared at first. I thought they were all members of some secret society. I thought the Viet Cong turned them on. Chick says a lot of people get ideas like that at first, but he says he and a lot of others have been pot smokers, or hats as they call it, for a long, long time. I'm scared of being caught. But the weird thing is, I'm even more scared of my buddies. They've been trained to find and kill. So have I, of course, but they're giggling and dancing and carrying on. I'm more scared of them than I ever am in action. I'm more scared of them than I am of the Kong. I don't know what I'm thinking about. I can't send you this.
Hello, Phoebes. Rehearsal was cancelled tonight. I was afraid of that. I should always take roles in several things at once. Then you're covered. I'm an actor. I'm used to acting out other people's fantasies. Gurney fantasies. Are they completely cast? Oh, you're waiting for a friend. Has he got a friend? Only you. Look, let's be modern about this. It's 1974, Valentine's Day, 1974. Look, can I come home with the two of you tonight? I've always wanted to have sex between two consenting adults.
Mom, dear Mom, I'm writing this diary for you of things I can't write in letters. Chick says writing it out all out will be helpful in straightening out my head. I'm down at the beach with Chick and all the other fellas, dancing. You should see us, dozens of us in our underwear, dancing on the beach, making little fires to cook our fish. I'm having experiences I never would have had back home. Your little boy is growing up, Mom. In many ways, this war is a wonderful experience. Oh, I don't mean I enjoy it. One would have to be a sadist or a masochist to enjoy war. Although, those qualities would be very useful in actual time of war, if there was a way to turn them off. Although, I suppose if we could turn them off, there wouldn't be any war. If we could turn them off in everyone at once. But I mean that I seem to be becoming aware, to be recognizing some of the influences in my life, to understand myself. Chick is a writer, Mom, a kind of person I always, would you believe it, used to distrust. Chick says, I'm getting my head. He says, it's very important not to get your head in a bad place. And I said, and this is my first pot joke, it's a special kind of humor. I said, isn't Vietnam a bad place to get your head?
We all stayed late into the evening. None of us working except for Carrie, but she didn't have any family. The minute she'd hang up the phone, it would start ringing again, with everybody listening to a different station and giving a different view. People from other offices would pop in and share what they'd heard. And one man, a respectable, middle-aged man, who ran the yachting magazine in the next office, came in bawling, crying like a baby, shouting, "It's a communist plot! It's the end of the world!" And the minute you'd get the story right in your mind, more information would come in and it would all change. And somebody was always crying. They couldn't find the vice president. They thought it was going to be a chain political assassination and I don't know what all. And then, not long after, an hour I think, although it felt like longer, they said he was going to be okay. They said the president was out of danger. And then, all of a sudden, all the church bells started to ring, all at once. And that's when I knew. That's when I knew he was dead. Well, I was the first person to say it. I was washing Lena, the accounts payables lady's face. She'd been crying and had spilled ink all over her face. And her phone rang. It was my mother saying, "Wanda, come home. He's going to be okay. They just said so." And then the fashion editor fell out of our office, yelling, "JFK's gonna pull through." And that's when the bells started ringing. And none of them were Catholic, so they didn't know what it meant. They just carried on smiling and grinning like fools. And I said, "He's dead. The president is dead. God rest his soul."
I'm from a little nothing town called Niles, not far from San Francisco. I grew up going to these incredible blackboard jungle type schools where like 10 or 20% of the students were on parole. I hated it. My parents fought all the time over money and religion. I had a little brother and sister, but I was reared in a family. When I was just a little kid, I was reading Ginsberg and following Martin Luther King in the South and Castro's revolution in Cuba. I even lied about my age to join the Students' Peace Union. It was in 1960, when I was 15, when they started the black student sit-ins in the South. I thought, now it's starting, now it's the time, and it was. We marched against Carol Cheswick's execution. I read a poem that I wrote. And we marched against the House on American activities. And I was practically a charter member of the SNCC and SDS. And we all got thrown into jail for trying to organize cafeteria sit-ins in Niles and Oakland. But we got out, and we went. Right off the bat, we went. All of us who'd been jailed, right down to Cuba.
I'm not interested in the 60s. I'm not interested in any of this nostalgic eras they're evoking, to tell you the truth. I mean, what are they really all about? I keep hearing the faggots I know saying, oh, but Berlin, New York is really Berlin in the 30s again, or Carla, darling, buy some ballerina pumps. If the market takes an upward swing, we're going to be back in the 50s. But we're not, you know? That's just people trying so desperately to find some meaning for their own time. Well, I don't want to get into anything heavy. This isn't really the place, and that's not what I came for. Besides, I've learned. If I've learned anything. And I think sometimes I have. Sometimes I think I've learned everything. I've learned that people don't want to hear me talk about ideas. People don't want to hear me talk at all. People want to look at me. I hate the goddamn 60s. I hate what happened in them and what didn't happen, and I hate what happened to me and what happened to other people. Does that take care of it? Can we agree about the 60s? Okay, let's just get that clear. They were rotten. They started out rotten and they got worse. I mean, they started out with Marilyn Monroe dying. How good could that get? Well, that's when they started for me. And look at it out there. Raining. I don't think the 70s are going to be any kind of overwhelming heaven either, if you want to know what I think. In fact, if you want to know what I think, and I know you don't, but even if you don't want to know, because even if you don't want to know what people think, the sad fact is, they're going to go right on thinking it anyway. What me, Carla, what I personally dig deep down in my own unsubdivided, living, pulsing, throbbing, bloody, real, unknown, unknowable, uncared for, and utterly unimportant consciousness think is that the 70s are just the garbage of the 60s.
My name's Sparger. What's yours? How have you? Oh, why, yes, I've done a number of things this year. Maybe you see my name next door on one of those stunningly mimeographed flyers for theatrical events of interest to the discriminating theatregoer. Let us see. I started out the year playing the fixed star Regulus at an astrological Halloween pageant in an abandoned garage, and then what's that? Oh, I always start the year with Halloween. I'm a realist. And then I did a really well-received improvised symphony concert underwater at the YWHA. And then I had a really busy week. At 8 o'clock I was the left thumb at a group sensitivity demonstration called Hands Off at the Merryman Episcopal Community Center. And then at 10, I played a movie projector with a twinkle bulb in my mouth in a drag production of Bonnie and Clyde at the Mass Dramatist Experimental Tavern. And then, at the stroke of midnight, I was the cathectic focus of a rather tedious telepathic theatre event. Oh, that one wasn't advertised. We all just sat together and tried to draw Clive Barnes to us with a pair of prayer. I try to keep busy.
We, that's Robbie and me. We, that's always Robbie and me. We met in Cuba. We spent most of 1961 in Alabama doing freedom rides and voter registration. And we had to learn passive resistance. Believe me. It was hard for Robbie, him being middle class and all. He wanted to fight back. When the Southern pigs would come at us, we curl up in the passive resistance position, and it was hard for him. When they'd hit me, he'd start to uncurl, and I'd yell, "No, Robbie! Remember what Gandhi said!" Because we read all the Indian philosophy together. We got beat for protesting the Bay of Pigs and Patrice Lumumba's assassination. We got thrown out of the UN for that one, and they beat us. Right up against that wall, with the quote from Isaiah about beating your swords into plowshares. They beat us. We were right in front. You can see us in photographs in the Times. And we stayed in New York for the protest against bomb shelters. For that, mostly, they photographed Norman Mailer. But we were there.
Within a few hours, do you remember this? Within a few hours, one of the major magazines had released a special edition. And within a couple of days, they all had. Mr. Kenedy bought it all. Every paper, magazine, he even taped from the radio. And later, once they'd announced the president was dead, he went rushing down and bought a color TV. Just went rushing down, bought it, and came back up carrying it, red-faced and puffing. We all watched, but it was just chaos. Mr. Kenedy has it all in scrapbooks. All the rumors, the configurations, all the scrapbook, all the Oswald stuff. He even recorded from the TV. He didn't go home for 3 days. He was even recording from the TV when Ruby did that awful thing, when he sealed off the truth from us forever by firing a single shot. Or was it 2?
I wanted to be a sex goddess. And you can laugh all you want to. The joke's on me whether you laugh or not. I wanted to be one. One of them. They used to laugh at Marilyn when she said she didn't want to be a sex goddess. She wanted to be a human being. Now they laugh at me when I say, I don't want to be a human being. I want to be a sex goddess. That shows you right there. Something has changed, doesn't it? Rita, Ava, Lanham, Marlena, Marilyn. I wanted to be one of them. I remember the morning my friend came in and told us all that Marilyn had died. And all the boys were stunned, rigid, literally, as they realized what had left us. I mean, if the world couldn't support Marilyn Monroe, then wasn't something desperately wrong? I had to spend the rest of the goddamn 60s finding out what it was. We're all living together, me and these 3 gay boys who adopted me when I ran away, in a loft in East 5th Street before it became a dropout heaven, before anyone even said drop out, way back when commune was still a verb. We were old movie buffs, sex mad, you know, the early 60s. And then this friend of mine, this sweet little queen, he came in. He passed out tranquilizers to everyone and told us all to sit down. And we thought he was just going to tell us there's a Mae West double feature on somewhere. And he said, Marilyn Monroe died last night. And all the boys were stunned. But I felt something sudden and cold in my solar plexus. And I knew then what I wanted to do in my life. I wanted to be the next one. I wanted to be the next one, to stand radiant and perfected before the race of man, to shed the luminosity of my beloved countenance over the struggles and aspirations of my pitiful subjects. I wanted to give meaning to my own time, to be the unattainable, luring love that drives men on, the angel of light, the golden flower, the best of the universe-made womankind, the living sacrifice, the end. Shit.
When this Siamese dancing thing's over, if it doesn't make Broadway, I'm supposed to tour 14 widely distributed colleges with an all-male cast of Liz Estrada and a Lebanese dialect. Unless I get cast in the amphetamine theaters, new production of the Third World War, it might be smart to get into that. I think the Third World War's coming back. The only thing is I don't want you to be in anything else for the entire rehearsal period of 2 years. Still, there would be something to do, and that's the important thing. If I don't get into something really time-consuming pretty soon, my liver's gonna wind up inflammable like a plum pudding. Alcohol's supposed to kill brain cells. The trouble is, it's not selective enough. It doesn't necessarily get the right ones.
By 1962, people were beginning to say the word student with fear. European visitors had told us how students had always been a political cause in Europe. But we were the first at that in America. We were something terrifically exciting and frightening. We were America's big chance for change, everybody's chance for change. On a national level, you'd have things happening like the Cuban Missile Crisis, when for the first time, Americans ran for the big cities with the skies full of police helicopters, afraid of real, not science fiction, but real possible immediate attack. It seemed they had to wake up. And for me, us, personally, was the time when Robbie and I went to Harvard and learned about LSD. Oh, those were the great times of drugs. The times when they were breaking the chains of lies and prejudice and television over Robbie's mind, over both our minds, over everybody's minds. Hallucinogens showed us how we contained the seed of all things good and evil within ourselves, and helped us to decide to make ourselves forces for good.
Mom, if I'm going to write these things, I really should be writing them in the sand for the sea to wash away, because I'm very, very afraid of this diary being found. But I want to have it for later. The changes in my head are happening so fast that I want to keep track of them. But words don't seem to go fast enough. That letter I sent you today was full of lies. No, not lies. I just can't tell you what it's like. That TV news you saw me on? There was a little village, one of dozens we've liberated. And you should see the natives getting all their possessions into a bundle in just minutes. And then pile the bundle on their head and run through the streets whenever we or the Kongs start closing in. They should be pretty good at evacuating by now, I guess, because it's important to remember, it is very important to remember, that this little country, arbitrary division on the map, has been the battleground for 10,000 years for any culture that has ever arisen to dominate the world. That is why it's so important that we finish the job this time, so that we can put an end to war.
I couldn't go on working in that job anymore. I remember walking down Broadway and how strange it was to see all the theatres were closed. There were pictures of him everywhere. People must have made a fortune selling those pictures. Although, maybe they were there all along and I just never noticed. It was like the sun had begun to eclipse. People were scared of a chain assassination and a war. But then that was gone. And all that was left was just disbelief. At St. Patrick's Cathedral, just outside it, I didn't get to go in. Hundreds of thousands of people were saying prayers for him. It was as if the entire human race had gone into mourning. Kings and queens came to his funeral. The TV broadcast of nothing else for 4 whole days. They even gave us the time off to watch.
I wanted to be beautiful. I was. I am. I wanted to be kind. I don't think I've ever been anything less. I wanted to be fun. You tell me. I dress well. I have a good figure. I have a witty little line of polite chat that nevertheless never fails to reveal a terrible vulnerability underneath. And I'm smart. I have before me a whole chart of Marilyn's mistakes. I could guide myself by her and avoid the pitfalls that befell her. I had it not. I could even act. I knew writers, painters, photographers. I was liberated. I liked men. I liked a couple of them a lot. I knew how to manipulate them. I set out with a ruthless plan to do men good. There is only one thing that I failed to take into account, and that's that. What with the various film journals, movie magazines, newswire services, television documentaries, re-release facilities, celebrity postcards, calendars, and endorsement ads, memorabilia shops, movie still collectors, fast club scrapbook keepers, beat-up enthusiasts, gossip columnists, biographers, and original soundtrack recordings. There are about 50 million people exactly like me. 50 million little medium manufactured racial subconsciousnesses that has systematically, for at least my 15 years of earthly existence, been subjected, as nearly as conglomerate marketing practices could swing it, to precisely the same arrogant, idealistic input as I. And the day after Marilyn Monroe died, 50 million little boys and girls rose up with one overweening, overwhelming, irresistible, indefatigable ambition to be the next Marilyn Monroe. And every dirty old man, cross-eyed agent, horny hairdresser, finger-fucking photographer, playwright, demented director, urgent acting teachers, many-handed managers, oral office boy, able choreographer, phallic voice coach, orgiastic dress designer, and every other form of unlaid, opportunistic, scaly, slimy, sleazy son of a bitch in this nation's great metropolitan casting centers suddenly found him, or her, or themselves, deluge on their 10 million tons of automated, undiluted, available, eager meat!
Fucking rain. I knew a boy once who could count raindrops. He said, nobody could refute him on that. He was a director. He had the audience in a one show, crawling on all fours. And when the audience got into the pitch black theater, they were hid in the face of the big sack fitter. But you probably saw it. Yes, I was in it. I think. I'm not sure, I don't know, I can't remember. I've been in so many shows now where the audience crawled in on all fours, got hid in the face of the big sack fitter. Something. He inspired confidence, though, this boy. The raindrop watcher. Of course, anyone can nowadays. People are so ready to believe anything you tell them. For instance, if I were to tell you that I wasn't always like this, you'd probably believe me, wouldn't you? My God, you would. Only on condition that I'm willing to believe that you aren't always the way you are. Okay, it's a deal. I believe you were different once. I believe everything was different once. I believe it was all the same once too. After all, you gotta believe something now that the underground is just an echo chamber and the flower children have all turned into fruits.
Down south, in 1963, we didn't feel alone anymore because we could hear our own music, Dylan and the Blessed Other starting to happen. We were all the young, reaching out to each other through wild, crazy means like that. The top 10 charts, and our hair, and where we dressed. I got taken for Dylan once. And the other side couldn't figure out what was happening. They killed Kenedy, but they couldn't stop what we started. Boys began evading the draft a lot. And we all became aware of that mindless horror going on under our name in Vietnam. And we marched for peace and civil rights and everything we marched. I don't know how many marches we were on. We'd hitchhike or take buses or trucks and travel anywhere to march. In blazing summer cities, blinded by flashbulbs, we'd see blue policemen and black police dogs, green soldiers and gray faces. And we'd wave at the faces with the free hand that wasn't helping hold a banner. And we'd read the slogans on the banners backwards from the sun shining through. War, more, no. People there to power, and one all are we. And we'd ripple and roll that river into the centers of tremendous towns. And there, in blinking lights, on the tops of famous towers, letters in flashbulb fire said, "Millions march."
Mom, I want to tell you about war. Things nobody ever says about it. I understand war now. I have to do it in this diary because they read our mail and sad to think the beach may be bucked. See, we have these men hiding in the jungle waiting to kill us. So have they, of course, they have us waiting to kill them because we have invaded their country. But we were only trying to get earlier invaders out. But they were only trying to get still earlier invaders out. I don't know where it started. I don't know where it ends. I got mad tonight and kicked over a little temple one of the fellas was building out of seashells in the sand. I said, "You killed a man today, Buster. I saw you." You ran him through with your bayonet and kicked him under the philodendron like my mother has back home. You can't kill a man in the morning and then spend the evening building little seashell temples in the sand. I wanted to fight. I wanted to fight. I wanted to fight! But then I couldn't. Fighting is so awful. Chick gave me a Librium and talked to me until I calmed down. Chick is, wow, wonderful, Mom. He laughs when I say it, but he's my spiritual advisor. I'm getting very spiritual, Mom. Chick is turning me on to Oriental religion.
Nah, I don't get confused for hurting for a lot of things at once. When I get confused is when I don't have any rehearsals to go to. Like now, I start drinking, looking around for somebody to get into, as it were. Nah, I can work 24 hours a day if I have to, and still come out looking good. I always come out looking good, no matter what piece of shit I'm in. Yeah, they're all shit. You liked it. You liked the one last week? The one with the big spitting scene? You like that, huh? Tell me. Did you read the review before you saw it? The one that said it was symbolic of things that couldn't be expressed any other way? I figured you had. Look, would you mind moving away? If I'm going to talk to a brick wall, I'd rather talk to a real one, or phony enough for two. I said, fuck off, freak. You think just because you buy me a drink you can bore me? You could have bored me just as much without buying me the drink. More, in fact. Move on. I'd rather sleep with myself. I'd rather not sleep at all than sleep with you. I'd rather talk to myself anyway. Alright, I am.
It's ridiculous to talk about an event like that from the point of view of someone like me. I mean, what difference does it make in the long run how I felt about it? I used my savings to do another year at CCNY. That's City College of New York. Enough so that now I have my temporary teaching certificate and can work as a substitute teacher. I just thought, if all of us who believed in him didn't try to make some good, then, well then his death would have been in vain. Oh, I'm not comparing my little contribution to what he'd have done if he'd have lived. If he'd have lived, he'd have stopped the war. If he'd have lived, he'd have solved the race problem. If he'd have lived, he'd have found a way for us all to live together. I know there are cynics who say, well, he didn't accomplish much in his 1,000 days. But to those I say, oh yes. Yes. Oh yes. And what exactly have you accomplished?
I threw myself with a sense of mission so strong that it would have made Joan of Arc look like a whale. I threw myself into Manhattan's lap, head first. I bought a subscription to show business and a subscription to Backstage. And then I borrowed 15 cents for the subway and went to all the casting calls. There were a lot of pretty girls in New York then. Would all line up, all pert and prettified, and do whatever we're told to do. Like good, bad little girls. Stand up straight. Swell your chest. Smile. Look left. Look right. And I'd look left. And I'd see the backs of the heads of a lot of pretty girls looking left. And I'd look right. And I'd see the backs of the heads of a lot of pretty girls looking right. So, I got a job as a go-go girl at the Metropole, who was still wore bras then. I sent out resume photographs to all the important agents. I met a lot of important agents. I went up with several of them. Once, I kept abreast of the very latest styles. I found a guy who would do my hair for free if I do a number with him in the back of his shop. Only we weren't yet calling it doing a number. We called it pussycatting. We were What's that word? Oh yes, swingers. He was young and cute. I was young and cute. It was an exchange of favors. It was also an exchange of favors with the guy who supplied me with hats, and why not admit it, with the woman who gave me jewelries. We were young professionals, helping each other. Those people got a lot of that kind of help from girls like me, and we were getting very professional. Well, I never walked the street, I never worked a bar, and I never rode around Times Square wearing nothing but a mink coat. Although, some would welcome that as a return to good breathing, compared to junkies who are doing the Times Square whoring nowadays. Because that's what we were. Rolled up copies of Backstage or Not. Whores. How did you think I got that job at the Metropole? Through character references?
The fact of the matter is, I wasn't always like this. Maybe people just weren't meant to live in the present. Meant? By whom? Who cares? Sure, I used to live in the present once. But we adapted. According to science, we always live underwater once too. We just haven't adapted to live in the present yet. Not till we grow asbestos filters in our nostrils and learn to live on monosodium glutamate and survive 6 inches of steel shoved up at us in every other doorway and ignore the pangs of dread and empathy and guilt that paralyze us every time we see some poor human being reduced to a lump of mucus come wobbling towards us with his ragged, flaking hand held out, blubbering and slobbering. Help me! Help me! Help me! For God's sake, somebody, please, help me! Uh-oh. I'm thinking about things I don't want to think about. I'm too drunk, too early. I'm trying to stay off drugs. I've got nothing left to stop up the back of my brain, and I'm having a memory hemorrhage. I'm having an attack of the truth. It's coming at me, and it is me. The truth. I'm sitting here in a public place, seeping and sopping and soaking and reeking of truth. And the end of truth is death.
Dear Buddha, the Kong I killed today had in his pockets, which I searched, for nothing must be wasted, right? The man I killed today had in his pockets a tiny little red lacquered capsule, Buddha. And in it, what do you think he had? You whom they call the all-knowing one. What do you think he had in his pockets, Buddha? What do you think? He also rolls into a little paper cylinder, sifts into a pipe and smokes and inhales whenever he comes into battle against me. All-seeing, all-knowing, omnipotent, omniscient Buddha, which I should have seen, which I should have known, but in order to find out which, I had to propel a ragged atom of burning metal into his irreplaceable heart, and kill him, and loot his body? Buddha, must men die so that other men can see that all men are truly the same? Must each man kill a man before he can see that other men are only men like him and no man must kill? Wasn't Christ enough, huh? If anybody has to kill a man before he can see that all men are one, then finally all men will be one, because there will be only one man left. And then, will that man finally be saved? Do we, for God's sake, all have to be tortured and robbed and exploited and die so that one last man can finally be saved?
The Black Rebellion was all that really seemed to matter in 1964. There were the riots in Harlem, and Robbie had called his mother in Wisconsin and said, "Can we come there?" because New York looked dangerous. And she said, sure, if he cut his hair. I mean, by her, he could die if his hair was the wrong length. So we went to my family in Niles, and my little sister took one look at us and ran screaming in the corner in their mobile home. And I said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "You're hippies, you hurt me." And I said, "Hippies? Ugh, I hate that word. Hippies don't hurt people." And she said, "Yes, they do. I see them on television all the time fighting with the police." I mean, and we started to learn what love really meant. It meant caring for one another, literally. Feeding and clothing and sheltering one another. It was as if a wave of love and beauty was everywhere, growing and becoming strong. The free speech movement arose, and I marched. And life itself was like a march to the new music that was sweeping the world now. The young of the world were uniting under the flag of individual freedom. And they were going to tell us what to do with our lives, sell us to a system, tell us what we can take into our bodies even. We showed them. Robbie and I were pushing speed on the streets at the lowest possible prices and working part-time in a people's drug rehabilitation center, too. It looked as if, maybe, at last, right here on this planet, and right here, at this very moment in our lifetime, civilization had finally begun.